Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for checking out this channel. I really do appreciate it. My name's Cheyne Walls and we're back here in my Laguna Beach art studio for the second episode of the story behind the photograph. And on this episode, we're gonna do probably the most complicated photograph I've ever done, the Tree of Life. And if you can believe it, this image here is over 20 separate images stitched together to create this one art piece. First of all, I apologize for the lack of space today. This is a working studio and today kind of turned into packing day. So we're kind of pushed off in the corner. But nevertheless, I really want to share the behind the story about this photograph here, Tree of Life. Now I named it the Tree of Life because this was captured in the fall time and it was just amazing to me coming up to this tree and these beautiful colors it's displaying for fall color, and not one leaf has hit the ground yet. So that inspired the naming for me. The real story behind this photograph is not kind of an adventure story, it's the technical side of this photograph. And like I said in the beginning, this is over 20 images stitched together to create this one art piece. Now those 20 images were needed to be able to capture this art piece as you see it now. The human eye could see this, but a camera couldn't, in the way that to get underneath this tree to be able to photograph kind of the middle here, and also to the sides as well as the top. Now, the artistic part of this photograph, I wanted to give a very short depth of field on this image to really showcase the depth and the kind of the technical idea behind this photograph, in the way that the front, these leaves up here are out of focus. The tree itself is in tack sharp focus, but the focus slowly falls off as you go farther back in the image. And that created just that depth and makes this image pop that much more in my view. So what I had to do to capture this, I actually taped out a grid on the area where this tripod was sitting. Because again, like I mentioned before, I need to capture images up close of the trunk, a little bit farther back, capture the foreground, because when I was shooting the trunk itself, the foreground would be, I couldn't pull enough depth of field. So I wanted that tack sharp. I want everything tap sharp up front here. The out of focus parts are going to be kind of the top and farther back of the image. So I had to capture the trunk in tack sharp, move back 2 feet, and here's kind of a diagram of how I did it. Because also too, the camera was pivoting to capture the panoramic look. And then after capturing the front in perfect focus, I moved back even farther, and that's where the top of this tree was captured. Each image captured with this correct lighting, because really the start of the image, everything obviously had to meld together. I couldn't shoot one in direct sun, one overcast, and that was really the trickiest part, was when the sun came through and gave me this beautiful dappled light here on the front, kind of in here area, I had to be able to, that's why I taped everything out, so I can run through my progression. And each capture, I think, was 1/8 of a second. So it's slow enough so I can get a little bit of movement, but fast enough that I can just jump through the images. Because if each image, usually I'm over a second, if each image that was stitched together was over a second, this would take almost a minute to shoot with movement and just exposure in itself. Sunlight didn't always stay around that long. So 1/8 of a second got me down to about 30 seconds to shoot this whole thing. And I was on it. It took 5 or 6 practice runs. And then luckily enough, I got the light and I'd done it enough times, I was able to get everything together. So once the sun just gave me this beautiful light and I had it set up, the flare was the first thing I needed to capture. That was the center point. That was the center of the image. I made sure to get the trunk of the tree. That was my starting point. Once I got that flare, it was capture, 4 images on this side, 4 images on this side. Take the tripod, step back, go on to my next marker, refocus. And taking a step back here, these are all polarized in the front. The top is not polarized because also too, that gave to me a little bit more depth of field, but we'll talk about that in a second. Step back, repolarize, refocus, because the camera is gonna be a little bit differently turned for this because I was shooting the bottom and I didn't want, it rained just before this, so everything was just coming together. But the haze off the water droplets kind of gave this look, which I did like on top. I kind of like that white, little bit of a haze out of focus look, but I don't like it when it's tack sharp, which the bottom was gonna be tack sharp. So I had to change the polarizer just a little bit to make all that go away, so you just had this crisp green front. When I got to my second mark, same thing. Took my image and I still had the dappled light, luckily enough, because I think that makes the image here. Dappled light, same thing. Center shot, which is directly of the trunk of the tree, and that's when I stitched. That was gonna be my center point to line up. And then and everything again was on my Nodal Ninja, so everything was marked out. I was using my 35mm lens for all this. So once that clicked in, boom, boom, I can pull the focus because I was about 2 feet farther back, and I can pull the focus of the trunk. The only reason I did want to move 2 feet back because now I couldn't see underneath the canopy, all this area. That would have been lost if I just started 2 feet farther back from the first grouping of photographs. Got that out. Then for the third set, this top here, this was the most difficult. Stepping back and actually raising the tripod 2 feet. Because also too now I'm gonna get these beautiful leaves just out of focus. I'm gonna get all this top. So that's gonna create more depth because it looks like it's rolling into the photo. Whereas the ones down here, we're just looking up underneath it. Still a cool look, but if you know this tree, it's been photographed a lot. And that was my main goal, was to do something different. And for what my creative way was kind of taking a little bit more technical look at it than more of an artistic look. So I really want to just create this whole new look of this tree that hasn't really been done before. I mean, you've seen long versions of this, but not where you get the inside under the canopy as well as the outside of the canopy in this kind of panoramic look. At least I haven't seen one. I was trying to do something different. So the camera's in its final spot. I'm on my final mark back from the tree. Same thing, I had to refocus, but now I refocused on the trunk again, because now all three of those sets of photographs, the trunk was gonna be in focus. So that's when I layer in post. That was gonna layer on top of each other. That was gonna become kind of my main pillar, so to speak. Everything was gonna grow off that pillar. And that one strong pillar with the 3 images, those would all line up and then I can go from there. So once I got that, having the trunk in focus, because also I'm farther back, these leaves are almost on top of me, so I didn't have to worry about having those out of focus. I didn't want to pull that focus, so I just left it and it just creates so much more depth in a 2D image, having just the focal pull. I love the look of the out of focus, and if you get close, you probably can't see on this. Maybe I'm more on the up close here, but the back falls out, and I love that depth of field. So we got all that, and I ran through it. Luckily enough, the lighting didn't change too much. So I was able to capture everything in a sequence that still would match up together. None had the hard shadows or just the no shadows at all from the fog. So then after all that was captured, I only had one go at it. I was very fortunate because after this, the clouds came in and I didn't see the sun again. I did another test just to be safe, to have everything, but to have depth of field for me works so much better when you have contrast. And the depth of field just didn't work in an overcast view. It became more muddy. Whereas this, with the actual contrast of the sun, the dappled light down here, it just works so much better. But I got that, took it in. Like I said, I set my pillar in post and just started adding all the images together. And so then there you have it. That's pretty much, this is a very technical image. This is probably in post. This probably took about 3 or 4 days in post of me working on it, and just, because we did have a little bit of a breeze. Look closer if you ever see this print in our studio or in a show or something like that. You can see over in this area here, there was some breeze, which actually helped me when I was masking these off, stitching them together, because it stitched a little bit easier. Whereas here, it was tough because the camera's moving, the branches always move a little bit. So putting these all together, they didn't always match up. But that's where having enough images taken, and there's a few within there. I had my, 5, 5, 5, the column plus 4. And then when I finished that, I did take a few extra, just one off to this side, one off to this side. Then that helped me just to keep the perspective and post on in case one of them didn't quite line up. I had a straight on line set that could go on top just so everything, that was my get out of jail free card. If the camera was just a little off, if the tripod wasn't perfectly set where it needed to be, those ones that I did straight on after I got everything, just in a quick line. So there's this shot here in the center with the trunk in focus, this shot here, center, this shot here, center. Those were able, I could take little pieces of those so everything lined up perfectly. And I use my beloved Alpa 12 TC medium format camera with a Phase 1 IQ 150 digital back. So that in itself gave me a tack sharp image just because of the quality of the medium format and the Alpa lenses, prime lenses. But that also too led in post, these is a massive, massive, massive file, which is good and bad. Post, even with the new Photoshop, it got frozen because this thing is well over 10 gigs. God, I think it's even closer to 15 with all the layers of the images on top of each other. But that allows me now, this is one of the smaller pieces. I actually, from my final file size, I think this is 30 by 62 if I'm remembering correctly. This is really shrunk down from the final image size of everything together. But in a good way, this is such a massive file size, I can print this massive, huge, fill up a wall with it, and you can still go in and it's gonna be tack sharp. If you'd like more information on this piece, the Tree of Life, feel free to visit our website. It has sizing and pricing in our acrylic form, which this is here. Or any other information, feel free to contact me. I can give you all that information. All my prints, my limited edition prints, we're only doing 18 of these. And this one's selling pretty quick. I think we're down to a handful, maybe a little bit more than that as of the time of filming. But yeah, feel free to contact me or check out my website if you want more information on this art piece. Thank you so much again for watching. Cheers.